Let's give a warm round of applause to Jerome Rifkin.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, I like to keep my talk relevant to more than just me and my story, and prosthetic feet are interesting, particularly to me and to some people in the house as well. But y'all didn't come here just to hear about feet, so I want to try to broaden the topic some, if that's okay. So I'm going to ask you for some feedback. In the realm of slanting the talk from business to technology side, who wants to hear more business stuff? So 4, 5, and you can only vote once on this particular question. So tried it, business, technology, more businessy, okay. Who wants to hear more about my personal story or more about the innovation process? Personal story, sorry. Innovation process, so more general, but also some specifics. Prototyping versus fundraising. Prototyping, fundraising. Ah, very practical crowd here, yeah. I think that'll pretty much fill this out, so. All right. Well, let me make this up on the fly then, as I usually do. My name's Jerome Rifkin. In 1996, I graduated with a biomedical engineering degree and a strong external rotation through the femurs, probably a result of being born tailbone first. And when I walked like this because my ankles didn't face forward. I was basically just rolling over my feet this way instead of this way. Then 2 years after that, I had a femur fracture, a high-level femur fracture that was classified as a hip fracture from having my clipless pedals too tight on a mountain bike. Whoops, totally my fault, I set those up. And I had to learn to walk again as a result of my injury. I took my physical therapy like a first graduate education. I got my hips to point forward, that brought my feet around to point forward, and I was very late to the experience of a study that I was very well educated in, that everybody in here, well, almost everybody in here, takes for granted, which is the experience of the human ankle and how it helps us walk, how it allows us to have slightly different motions in each step we take, how it conforms to the transition between tile and carpet without upsetting you and making you wish that you hadn't stepped on the carpet because now you're in pain. So I took about 4 years from my accident to have the experience of this. So I can walk almost anywhere without burning my hand, which didn't used to be the case. Couldn't carry a bowl of soup across the room to the table without having it on a bowl. And that all changed. And I became fascinated by how to help people more than myself with the amount of pain that I had incurred to get to normal. So I moved to Boulder just about that time and started wondering, do I want to have a healthy social life or do I want to have my own research? It's hard to have both. I saw one of the advertised topics was how to have life balance and enjoy the journey. I gotta say, it's easy to have a hobby that you're passionate about, like inventing. And for a long time, it was my hobby until I was able to quit my day job through being a grant recipient. And don't lose touch with other parts of your life. It's easy to, when you have a passion, it also has you, and it's easy to be consumed by your passion. Don't give in to that. Don't fight it so hard that you stop doing it. But at the same time, don't lose the other aspects of your humanity. It's too important to enjoy life, to keep going for as long as you will need to persist in the path of invention, and ideally even monetization of invention. You will feed it before it will feed you. And there will be blood, sweat, and tears before the journey is done. So, Anyway, I was late to learning to walk well, as I said. And I chose to not have a terribly healthy social life. Music is a big outlet of mine, and now dancing, now that I can actually move well. But I did spend 15 to 20 hours a week cloistered away in my extra room in my house, prototyping to the best of my abilities with hand tools, then a drill press, then a small mill and lathe that I was talked my way into. Little plug for Shoreline Mills and Lathes. They are really good little household tools. Through the process, there were a lot of times when it would have been advantageous to just say, you know, I should really apply myself at work. I should maximize my earning potential and give up, but it was just so much fun. And if it's not fun, if it's not passionate, consider other alternatives, because it's going to be something you've got to enjoy to do. I mean, when the lightning strike took out my apartment where I had my spare room and forced all of my prototyping equipment to go into storage for several months while I was living in a hotel, that would have been a really convenient time to say, you know, enough's enough. Instead, I doubled down and bought SolidWorks on a credit card. SolidWorks is an engineering CAD station tool. That was terribly said. And I taught myself SolidWorks, and that made progress faster. Hand prototyping is something I love to do, and it's also really awfully time inefficient. And if you've got a great hand model, you sure as heck can't use a 3D printer to make it better. But if you've got a great CAD model, you can iterate it a lot faster. If I hadn't gotten SolidWorks, I probably could not have communicated my ideas well enough to the National Institutes of Health to be awarded an SBIR grant, Small Business Innovation Research Grant. I applied several times and they kept saying no. And I kept not understanding why they were saying no until I asked people who had been recipients of similar grants. And they were like, oh, well, the NIH doesn't award grants to individuals. They award grants to teams. And you're not a team, you're an individual, so of course you're not going to get this. So I grew a team. I learned to grow a team. I recruited that guy, a scientist at CU, who has, you know, publishing experience, credibility with scientists, which at the time I had a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and I was asking scientists for money. Science is a club. There are lots of clubs. And if you're asking from outside the club, you don't get the advantage from asking inside the club. This can be seen in many aspects of society, whether it's race or gender. People recognize people who are like them as being like them, and they wouldn't ask themselves certain questions because they know the answers to certain questions. But if you're not in the club, you probably don't know the questions, much less the answers. So they're probably going to assume that you don't know. And when you're providing only a written document with no presentation and no question and answer, you can't address everything that's required to get the belief and the credibility that you're going to need to have for them to give you money. So what do? You've got a page limit. You can't address all the questions. So you have to have the team that has the credibility, that's in the club, and you've got to present the team at least as strongly as you're presenting yourself, because nobody's going to give you money if they don't understand you as a person. So a little bit on the fundraising process for grantsmanship. Well, my Phase 1 SBIR did get picked up. That was great. I quit my day job, which was a job I never liked, which actually, I would recommend, if you're really serious about bringing your innovation to market, get a day job that does not fulfill you. I hated my day job. I did technical support for healthcare software. I was on the phone making excuses for bad code to people who didn't want to hear it. Like, yeah, you've got a workaround now. So we can just close that case. We've documented the steps to reproduce, and development's going to fix that in a timely fashion. Is never good for you, but you can't say that part. So if it feels like it's sucking your soul, go do something that builds your soul. If your innovation process is what feeds your soul, you're doing it right. And I didn't like the grant work, but it was worth doing because the other stuff fed my soul. And didn't like the patent work. Kind of hated it. But there's people who do get paid a lot of money for it, and it's hard work, and it should be done well if you're going to protect your designs. And even the patent work, didn't like it, but I always went to a coffee shop with good pie and chai, and they had a pie and a chai for $5. I don't know if you remember the Bookend Cafe, Boulder. Anyway, I've been around here a little while, but have fun during the process. Develop little rituals. Every Tuesday, I did my pie and a chai night and patent work with my patent agent. You can actually make a lot of progress with patent agents who are a lot less expensive than patent attorneys. They're not attorneys. Don't have the agent write your claims or you will regret that. Have an attorney draft your claims. They're the only really enforceable part of a patent. If you say, well, in my specification, it says clearly how to do this, and that's not addressed in your claims, congratulations. You've invited everybody in the industry to do what you're doing, because you can't stop them from it if it's not in your claims. But I think that was probably covered by the two previous guys, or if it wasn't, I might have gotten it wrong. Again, I'm not a patent attorney. I'm a mechanical engineer, biomedical engineer, and take everything everybody says with a grain of salt. I will provide terrible advice to the wrong people, but great advice to the right people. And you don't know if you're one of the right people or not, neither do I. And that's true of anybody you'll get advice from. I've gotten a lot of really awful advice from people with a lot of money. And by trying to follow their advice to please them to get their investment, I slowed down the progress of the company and ultimately didn't land the investment because they said, well, that advice didn't really work out that well for you. Maybe we're not a good fit. I was like, well, that was a real exercise in futility. Since so many people did ask about fundraising or asked to hear about fundraising, I'll talk a little bit about that. There's grants. Angels and venture capitalists are the major divisions of fundraising I've run into. Angels, as a quick summary, used to be that there would be Broadway plays that didn't have financial backers, and they'd say, God, this is such a great play, this is art, and there's no way, it would take an angel, there's no way we'll have the budget to make this happen. And then they would find their angel, and that's how angel investing became a term. High net worth individuals probably became high net worth individuals through retaining their wealth, not spending it frivolously and not giving it away to every entrepreneur who tried to part them from their cash to further their goals. And that may not be the most polite way to say it from the entrepreneur's perspective, but that's how you will be seen during the coffees and lunches and meetings that you manage to arrange. There's always that skepticism that, are you a con? And has anybody here been taken by a con? No? Nobody in the room? 1, 2? I have. 3 in the room. Yeah, I got conned once out of $6 grand from just a slick talker. He hit me like 4 times. He was good. And he left town just as well for him, kept me out of jail. And then there was a business con too. But that's another story. Anyway, you'll be seen with the air of skepticism. And, show your passion, but not so much of your pride. Because you're honestly going to have to let them know that there are things wrong. Because if you okay, the best fundraiser I had contact with was actually that con that I said I wasn't going to talk about so much. He's a businessman who I hired to run my company who ran it into the ground. We're still trying to figure out how to recover from that one. And there's probably a way. We'll see. But he was a great fundraiser. He heard what everybody said during every meeting and presented changes to the story to keep up with what each person said, but they weren't cumulative. They didn't make an overarching picture. He was telling people what they wanted to hear. He was very charming, very cosmetically appealing, and had the air of the foreign. He was from another country with a great accent. And he was a charmer. And he raised, in 5 months, using my good reputation, $2.5 million, 2.4, something like that. I mean, my phase 1 grant and phase 2 grant were 1.2 million, and that carried me and my little shoestring operation of frugality and passion for 5 years, 4 years, something like that. 4 years. And under his leadership, we burned through that $2.5 million in about 6 or 8 months, which I wouldn't have thought was possible. And neither did our investors, despite having monthly board meetings. But regardless, I digress. Although you did want to hear about business. Careful, it's a snake pit sometimes. One of the things I've been criticized on in business is that I'm fair. And that's a problem. Because business is kind of a gladiatorial marketplace, and lots of people approach it that way, where you see it in the justice system as well. Both sides argue their case to the limits of how well they can argue their case within ethics, and then the jury decides. Now, they weren't saying, well, with all due respect, the client has had nice days and he may have killed somebody, but he's not a terrible person. No, the prosecution prosecutes, and you will find business leaders prosecuting in a rather cutthroat manner to forward their goals. And fairness, I think, is part of being a good person. I've found that lots of business leaders don't concern themselves with that part of humanity, of that being a good person thing. That's up to you, how you want to run your enterprise. I think it pays off in the end to run it so that you can respect yourself and want to keep doing it. Because if you lose your passion, you'll quit. So, from my point of view, I don't think there's too much I would have done differently, except I'd have been more organized and faster about it to focus my efforts to be more on point. When I got my grants, I knew things about engineering, I knew things about biomechanics, I knew things that other people didn't know, and I was very excited to explore what I knew and other people didn't. But I didn't explore what lots of people knew and I didn't, which is a coherent methodology for product development. If you've got a physical product, lots of people have developed physical products, even electronic products now. There's product development methodologies that I would recommend that, it's patent writing, it's grant writing, it's educating yourself about things that aren't necessarily your passion, but will make you more efficient at pursuing your passion. Don't neglect those topics of research. So how long have I been talking for here? Anybody?
We have 15 minutes.
Got 15 minutes left?
And we got 30 minutes left.
Oh, 30 minutes left, great.
So how long have you been talking? 15.
That's very well said. Did I say something about organization recently? It's not one of my natural skills, it's something I have to work toward. So, that's a little bit about my story. My business. I got the phase 1 grant. I got up through human subjects trials. It worked real well, but it wasn't robust. I had a mean time between failures, so how often it broke on average of about 10 days. That was frustrating because this is somebody's foot that they can't walk without. And it's biomechanically different enough so that swapping back and forth between this wicked stiff carbon fiber technology and something that has subtle motion to it, it's not really polite on one's back to have them suddenly switch back and forth always. And 7 of my 10 users were in Colorado Springs, which is like a 2.5-hour journey. And so you get home just in time to get that, hey, I broke my foot phone call. And you're like, oh, I get to turn around to do it again tomorrow. And not exactly a model of efficiency. So, planning carefully or suffering the consequences. I didn't think it was going to be that bad. I didn't think it was going to break so often. But people do things that you don't think they're going to do. That's one of the problems of being a biomedical engineer is people are so darned individualistic. God love them. They just do things. And, you know, the point is to re-enable people to do things. And, you know, in a more recent generation of technology, I mean, so anyway, that got us to phase 2. We landed the phase 2 grant. That was like $850,000. It was enough to hire an additional person, which then a lot of your time, my time as an entrepreneur, became person management and task management. And then I was doing the accounting. Arguably, I should have not hired a junior engineer, but should have hired an accountant and the experts I needed to free me up to just do the things that I should do. And on the other hand, had I simply stayed an engineer, I would not have had any success with the fundraising because the business acumen you develop outside of your comfort zone is part of what makes you a well-rounded business person, which if you're going to raise money and you say, I'm an engineer, I want to tell you all about technology, they're going to say, how does this make money? Tensile integrity, fascinating. I mean, really, and the third yawn when you're talking the tech, and then they're just waiting for the part where you're going to talk their language, not your language. And their language, as a high net worth individual, probably has something to do with cash and how they're going to invest in your company, and you're going to turn around and provide them with meaningful returns, like the mythical 10x. Oh, everybody wants a tenfold return on their investment. And how much, so you've got pro forma financials that say you're going to dominate the market within 3 years and provide me with a 10x for 3% of your company. Well, I got news for you, pal. I'm not going to give you $500,000 for 3% to anything, unless it's like the gross domestic product of Uganda, which I got an email saying I could get for. Right. So you see where this is going. So 3%, more like 30% feels like value to an investor. Oh, my value, the cash I'm providing has enough value to get 30% of your thing. So how much money do you need? Well, as an entrepreneur, I can tell you, raising $500,000 is really hard. It's almost as hard as raising $1 million, because you're talking to high net worth individuals who probably earned their money, or it was given to them by their parents as they passed away or something. And it's a whole lot easier to raise like $10 million than it is to raise one, because you're not talking to high net worth individuals anymore. You're talking to venture capitalists. A venture capital fund could have anywhere from $150 million under assets, which is a fairly small fund, to $500 million or $1 billion under assets and employ tens of people. And from a venture capitalist perspective, let me put my VC hat on, because as an entrepreneur, you've got to wear, and as an inventor, you'll probably end up being an entrepreneur because you're probably not going to have a whole lot of money to convince people to do things by paying them. So you'll probably have to do, you know, one who does, an entrepreneur. You'll probably have to do a lot yourself. So you got to adopt the mindset of the person you're going to be talking to so that you can speak their language. You have to be a chameleon. So let me put on my hat of a venture capitalist. I've learned a few things about what they do. They get a lot of unsolicited emails. Don't be one. Get an introduction. Find out why you think this venture firm will invest in you. Do you do clean tech? I'm a VC who does clean tech. Maybe there's something to talk about. Do you do pet supplies? I do clean tech. Why did I just receive an email from you? Now I'm pissed off because you didn't even respect me enough to find out I was somebody you wanted to speak to, who I would want to speak to you. It's not a match. You're just spamming people. Not that I've ever spammed people with emails who are venture capitalists. Or maybe a couple times. But I learned, and I don't do that anymore. I heard a guy talk who was also an entrepreneur in the biomedical engineering space. He researched venture capital funds. So, all right, so as a VC, hold on, I got a limited amount of attention, a limited amount of time. I'm moderately well paid in my point of view, although a lot of people would think I'm well paid. I think I work real hard for the money. And I got about 10 things I can really track. I got about 10 investments I can really pay attention to. And I've got money in each one. And when one of them sends up a flag, we're running out of money, our CEO flaked out, our buyers aren't buying suddenly, I've got to scramble because my cash is on the line. By the way, it's not my cash. I never really call it my cash unless I'm angry. But it's what I had to go to private equity funds and super high net worth individuals and tell them that I was going to make them a lot more money out of their money because I'm good at this. I can spot winners and losers, and I can find at least one thing that's going to provide a 10x return. And that 10 times return will float the other 9 zombies and dead things I invested in with all that money. Because I need to hit a home run every so often, because statistically speaking, I'm better off taking my fund to Vegas and putting it all on the craps table on the field, because the field has a 42% chance of winning. And venture investing is about like 25 or 30. So that's why they're going to look for their mythical 10x, because they need to have things that win. So as an entrepreneur, that puts a lot of pressure on you to say, I'm not going to sell you a crater on the moon. I'm going to sell you the whole moon. My intellectual property is not just a deed, it's a map. And so there's a lot of inflationary pressure on entrepreneurs to push it up to get the investment money. And yet there's a lot of deflationary pressures in the system to try to keep you grounded. And don't let it make you too small, because then you're like, well, all right, I guess this isn't worth doing. I'm going to let it go. And a lot of people say, don't fall in love with your idea. I disagree. You're not going to do it if you don't love it. And the world needs ideas and love to move forward. And maybe don't fall in love with an application of your idea. I designed a kind of biomimetic joint structure that, I said I wanted it to go into helping people before it went into hurting people. Well, we're to market. It's helping people. Can I sell it to DARPA now as robot feet? Ethically, I'm okay with that now. I fulfilled my goal. And if you're really serious about invention and disruption, I would go get yourself a copy of Christensen's first work, The Innovator's Dilemma. It describes his thesis of the disruptive technology force in the marketplace very clearly and across many different marketplaces and industries. And the marketplace disruption is really what gets you the 10x. And one of the fundamental lessons from the Innovator's Dilemma is don't fall in love with the application of your technology. Prosthetic feet is a rather limited market, which is beautiful because it helps people. Robot feet are scary because Skynet needs legs, and I don't really want to make the Terminator. Yeah, well, if I could ride a Terminator, that would make it better for a while, until they decide they don't like being ridden by their human masters. But talk to Google about that. They're the ones making the brain behind the thing. Oh, wait, they bought up all the robot companies, too. Anyway, so venture capitalists have about 10 investments they can invest in, and if they've got $150 million in their in their pocket and their brand new fund, there may be 1 or 2 people, because they can't burden that fund with a lot of overhead, and God knows they want to make 6 figures. So maybe it's 1 person making low 6 figures, or it's 2 people making high 5 figures. That's probably 1 person. So he's got 10 investments he or she can make. So you need to be raising $15 million if you're going to be one of those 10 investments of that $150 million fund. And so what's the risk profile of what you do? How much money are you likely to need over your life cycle? Because if you're going to go into a venture capitalist office and say, I need $2 million, I've got a use of proceeds for $2 million, they're going to say something about dry powder. I don't know why, but they tend to like war metaphors and piracy metaphors. But dry powder, how much gunpowder are you going to have when the unexpected happens? Sure, you've got a plan. I'm going to read it. I'm even going to study your industry and tell you if I think you're right. And maybe I'll be right, maybe you'll be right, maybe we'll both agree. And if we both agree, maybe I'll invest, maybe. But the unexpected will happen. And you've got $2 million, so if I'm investing $2 million, really I'm investing 5, because I'm going to keep in a fund for your rainy day so that you don't lose my $2 million. And as somebody who's been accused of losing $2 million, I can tell you there's a tone in people's voice that they get. I won't subject you to the whole thing, but yeah, they're going to keep some dry powder. They're going to keep some plan, and you know, if they decide that you're done and they pull the plug, that frees them up to make other investments. So it's not really, I mean, sure, they'll hate it, but not like you will. So anyway, if you've got a sporting goods thing, you want to find yourself a nice, small $50 million venture fund. If you've got a medical device, this is one of my conundrums, is I've got a manufacturing product. It is a Class 1 exempt medical device. As such, I don't have a lot of FDA regulatory burden. Generally, dealing with FDA regulatory burden will cost you about $1 million. So that's $1 million I don't have to raise. I was very happy about that. But still, I have to talk to venture folk who are interested in investing in medical devices, because they're the only ones who want to talk to me. And medical device people, well, you know, there's the pharma side, and then there's the drug device side, and you know, to find just the device investors, you got to winnow out your pool quite a bit. And then the medical device investors say, well, isn't this a manufacturing play? I'm like, well, yes, it is. Oh, yeah, because you see, I've got a $450 million fund, and there's 3 of us. So I'm in charge of $150 million. And again, I can only keep track of like 10 things. You don't need $15 million. Thanks for saying so. You just saved me like 45 minutes of this hour-long meeting, because I'm going to go now. And thanks for that time back. I really appreciate that. And I've had those conversations. So, you know, you need to figure out soup to nuts how this is going to work before you set up your financing plan. You've got to have a fair idea of a business plan. You've got to have a fair idea. Well, okay, if you're going to get venture money, that's all true. If you know you're going to need venture money or angel money, or how much money you need, if you consider this area here as the journey, I'd say if you're back here, you've got an idea, and you're super excited about your idea. I remember this point. It was wonderful. I felt like I had a mission for the first time in my life. There was a calling, there was a purpose, there was a reason that I wanted to get out of bed and do things. And it had nothing to do with anything that paid me money. It was great. I didn't need much money to do what I had to do here. So I spent 5 years between here and significant first funding. I thought it would be 2. So I spent a long time here, cooling my heels, making limited progress, and keeping a lot of passion. And then I made teams, I got grant funding, I got first funding, quit my day job, and got to choose any 80 hours a week I wanted to work, which was great. I got to sleep late, I worked until 3 in the morning, that's my natural lifestyle, swell. And 80 hours, it's not really an exaggeration. I had a lot of passion, a lot of motivation, a lot of dedication. And then, you know, you get further down the line and God, so the accounting tasks are starting to take 10 hours a week, and the patent writing tasks, and you know, everything's starting to add up, and the core skill that I bring to the enterprise is now something I spend 25% of my time doing. Really need employees, really have to offload some of this work, start looking for significant funding before you get to that point. Just for your own peace of mind, triple what you think you're going to need, because that's what you're really going to be asking for anyway. And when they say, what's your use of proceeds? You say things like I was afraid to say at the time. And it's not like playing it safe got me tons of funding. So I would not recommend holding back on caution. Say, I haven't built a business before. I'm going to make mistakes, or I'm going to need to hire a CEO. And one way or the other, it's going to be expensive. Hiring a professional CEO, who's going to take that job at a valuable time in their career when they could be working for GE or Westinghouse or some big player making 6 figures? If we want a good person, we have to lure them from something else that they would want to do. You might need $200,000 for 1 year for one employee. Probably your $500,000 fundraise doesn't say that. I know mine didn't, and that's what it took. So, when you think you need to raise $500,000 or $250,000, I have said that so many times. Of all I need is that $500,000, and I never got the $500,000 all at once. And I was never able to make the progress of somebody who is well capitalized, to make the progress all at once because you knew you had a big bank account. So I needed $500,000, but I got 50,000. That was good, you know, little wins, make it play. That's the next generation. That's the prototype that goes from here to here, maybe. Great, it's a win. But you're living to fight another day. You're not preparing for the battle of going to market. And I've been there. You could say, well, I'm going to keep my equity and make it work. I'm going to bootstrap this, and I've done that. The ultimate scary story of bootstrapping is the Xerox copier. Does anybody know the story of the guy who invented the Xerox copier? He was a patent attorney, and he had an idea, and he patented it himself, and he ate cat food and ramen noodles and hot dogs for years waiting for this thing that he knew was going to change the world. Oh, and he was right. And it took so long to work through the prototype phase because he was going to keep all the equity. And just like high net worth individuals can be seen as being greedy for wanting 30% of whatever you're offering for however much money you think they're going to part with, entrepreneurs can be seen as greedy and controlling because they want to keep all the equity and all the control. And it's always a balance, and it's always about teams. And you can lead a team, but you can't force a team. You can get people to walk beside you. You can get people to walk behind you if you're walking faster than they are. But try making people walk in front of you. You're going to need a weapon. And that's not a team, that's a hostage. And you'll get there. And nobody knows if you'll be in front or the investors will be in front when it all comes down and you're out of cash. And there's that next fundraise to get. And you've got to go to the venture capitalists now because the angels are tapped out and they're saying, well, you're going to need a team of 10. We're not going to finance a team of 10. You know what the burn rate is on a team of 10 people, which is as far as you are now down this innovation process? You're going to need to go out and raise like $10 million. You're going to need a better business plan. You're going to need a bigger market. Oh, you need a bigger market than you've got. Is there any place else this technology can be used? Do you know of any? Well, you're the expert. You better come up with an idea. So, 10 minutes. I'm getting the warning. So concentrating on my story, business rather than tech, and fundraising. I feel like we've covered those topics very well. Is this the 10 minutes for questions, or is that the 10 minutes after this 10 minutes? Sure. Okay. Well, back to what I actually do. This is a real human foot. Cut it off of an investor. No, that's terrible. It's not true. What I was going to say is playing it safe. Some people like a sense of humor.
That's a right foot.
Yes, it is. I love the people that have a sense of humor. If you're one of those business people or serious people, God love you, you're going to do so well. Because a lot of people are really serious when they talk about business, and they don't think my jokes are funny. Oh well, I'm not giving them up. They're just too important to me. Anyway, so the foot is not this floppy, but it could be. If you relax it, it wouldn't quite be this floppy. It would be about this floppy. And when you relax your foot and take it in your hand, you can get some pretty fair motions out of your foot. And yet, this is modern technology. Modern technology is a carbon fiber diving board construction that it's bouncy as all heck. And it's awesome for running, because when we run, we stretch our Achilles tendon and recoil off of it, and 60% of the energy for this step came from the last one. Tremendously efficient as running machines. And you add carbon fiber runs like the wind. Well, our Achilles tendon is 90% efficient. So it captures 70% of the energy, manages to impart 60% of the energy of the previous step. What's that?
It's still a slab.
This? Well, our Achilles tendon is 90% efficient. This is 80% efficient. Is the Blade Runner cheating? No, he's different. We have Luke here, is also a runner, a double amputee, who wears my product and helps me out in things like this. And I made him show up this morning, and God love it, I'm actually going to let him talk. But Oscar Pistorius and all the other. It's a shame about that, how that story is turning out now. But how all the Paralympians run so fast is that they continue to accelerate, pumping more and more energy into their carbon fiber blades, because if we try to store that much energy in our Achilles tendon, it will sprain, strain, tear, rupture, and you will stop running. Whereas these things don't feel pain. You can shove so much energy into carbon fiber that somebody running a quarter mile can continue to accelerate the entire quarter mile just by putting more and more energy into their carbon blades. Whereas for a human, you accelerate for usually about the first third of the race, and then the person who holds their speed best wins. So, very different thing. This technology is not all about running, it's all about walking. This is what I designed. It's about walking on uneven terrain. It's about walking with support and stability. When we walk, we have tremendous ankle flexibility that we don't use. We walk, we get 5 degrees of motion from the ankle malleoli and 5 degrees of motion from the subtalar joint. So you need 10 degrees of forward motion to walk. That's this right here. It's pretty subtle. If you're in the back of the room, you're probably looking like, he's not really moving much, and I'm not. And here's another subtle one. This motion right here, axial rotation, this is your your tibia and fibula doing this right here. Swinging around each other. Lets you change direction while you're walking. God, people can miss that one. If you can't change direction while you're walking and you got a stiff carbon fiber foot you're trying to navigate, I've talked with Vietnam veterans who are like, I hate that my foot makes me rude. I'm like, it's a very strange thing to hate about your foot. Tell me more about that. What does it mean? What do you mean? Well, if I'm on a crosswalk trying to get across a busy intersection, it takes me a while to get my steam up. And once I'm going, if I stop, I'm not going to make it across the intersection. And I can't change direction. I can't navigate. I'm just straight line powering through to make it. And if there's a really pretty girl coming opposite me, I am an asshole. I can't do anything about her. I'm going to get hit by a car. I shoulder through her, or she moves, or an old elderly person, anybody it is, that's what I can do. Like, that's a tough one. I never really thought your foot would make you rude. And also this little motion right here, we're just talking 2 or 3 degrees of axial rotation, 2 or 3 degrees of inversion, eversion, that are easy to access. You know, you think about what it is to have an amputation. This is something Luke lives with every day. You've got bones that are cut short and a muscle that's wrapped underneath them. And the bones are probably pretty pointy. And it's not made to take weight. But you sure as hell want to walk, because being stuck in a wheelchair is a very different experience of life. During my hip fracture, I spent 2 months in a wheelchair. I have never been so grateful to stand up again. My God. To use prosthetics as opposed to a wheelchair to walk and be able to look people in the eye, it's a huge privilege when you see the other side. And so, actually, Luke, why don't you tell us something about your experience? If you come up here, Tom, can we borrow that microphone? I do love to talk, I know.
All right, so how's it going, everybody? My name is Luke Kaiser. I'm 20 years old and I'm a student here at CU Boulder. So what Jerome was asking, just a little bit of my experience with these feet, I should say. I did have a carbon fiber foot just like those, just like you see right there. I have them sitting over there right now. And like Jerome was talking about, it's extremely bouncy, and walking on it is not like walking on a normal foot. I actually got, my amputation happened 2 years ago. I got into a pretty gnarly accident. But that foot compared to the foot you see here, which is what I have on, the second I put it on, it felt like I had my feet again. It's unbelievably lifelike in the movements and the range of motion that you can actually get. Like he was talking about with his friend that was the Vietnam veteran. It's very similar when I'm like walking down the hallway in class or something and someone's coming my direction. With my other feet, it's hard for me to move side to side and get out of the way, so I get in those awkward, we both like stand there for a second. That happens to me all the time, or used to, not even close to what it is now. And just my everyday life has improved tenfold. I mean, I would dread waking up in the morning and having to go walk all the way across campus. And now it doesn't bother me at all. I can stand up, walk around, and do everything that I used to do in the past. And that's all I credit to these feet. So I had my original feet, it's called the Seattle Catalyst foot. I had that for a year, and I was wearing them every day, obviously, and just trying to get acclimated to my situation. And I couldn't really do all that much. And then when I came across Jerome here in November of last year, my abilities have increased unbelievably. I am shooting in the 70s again for golf. I've gone snowboarding. I'm able to play basketball. Just my overall confidence and everything is just increased so much just because of the ability that I have to go out and be able to do everything that I wanted to do or was able to do in the past.
Can you show your feet?
Yeah, so actually it's this same foot that you see right here, but I'll step back. So I've got, my leg goes down to right here on both of my legs. So just like Oscar Pistorius, I'm a bilateral BK, so just bilateral amputee below the knee. Is there any questions or anything you guys have for me?
Yeah, you mentioned one other time about how you have different sizes of feet that change your height. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the way that prosthetics work, I can just adjust my feet pretty much at any time. I've got my blades and my original feet in my bag right over there. So where the foot itself, it is universal for my leg. So I can unattach the foot that I have on and just put a different one on the same leg. So here, like you can see with this, this foot is a little bit shorter than this foot. This one's sitting a little higher. So if
For a more dramatic difference.
yeah. So this foot sits significantly higher than this one here, and my leg attaches to this part, or it would attach to this part, and so that difference right there brings me from about 5'10" right now to 6 foot if I'm wearing this foot right there. So it's pretty cool to be able to adjust and do different things like that, or on any given day if I wanted to be 6'5", all I would have to do is switch out my pylon in my leg, and there it is.
Can you run faster, or there's advantages and disadvantages of the higher one versus the lower one? And also about the reliability issues that you were talking about earlier, the 10 days walking time before breakage.
Fortunately, that was about 8 years ago.
Okay, so
We passed our ISO certification now. 2 million steps of robotic walking, simulated walking takes about 25 days to accomplish. And we've done it from weights ranging from 165 pounds simulations to 240 pound simulations. So,
have you experienced breakage?
I've not experienced any breakage at all. So as we continue to try and develop the product, I've actually had to switch out feet as we make improvements to it. But I've been on these same feet for the last 3-4 months.
yeah, something like that.
I've had no problems at all. So.
Quick question, excuse me, on the technology. Are the foot that you developed obviously helps in walking. Does it have disadvantages in running? Because obviously the
Yes, it does.
biomechanics are going to change on what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd recommend it for I'm late for the bus speed jogging, but not the full-on sprint. It's optimized for an inverted pendulum motion of walking with an easy flowing ankle rather than the spring off of running. I'd like to be able to do that too, but one thing at a time. I'm sorry, you had a question?
Other than
Oh, and I'm supposed to repeat the questions, I just remembered, so I'm going to actually repeat your question.
other than the height difference on the different feet, do you have a pair for basketball or for dancing?
So the question was, other than the height difference, do you have specialized feet for specialized activities?
So this foot here, I'm a big golfer, as I mentioned earlier. This one actually has a higher degree of motion in this direction. So like when I'm swinging, this gives me more ability to like roll over and transfer my weight. So I use that pretty much for golfing, or if I'm gonna go run around and like play basketball or something like that, I would use blades, which is what you see here, which is pretty much only for running around and like being super active and stuff like that.
Balancing on the toes, no heel strike, very athletic stance.
You done with that?
Yeah, I wish.
Maybe at some point. Never know. Particularly if he puts on some weight.
Question?
Please.
With those attachment points, is there any kind of advantage to being able to couple directly to skateboards, surfboards, skis, or anything like that?
So the question was, with this industry standard connector, is there an advantage to being able to skip the natural anatomy and just go straight to the end effector of a pair of rollerblades, for example? And the question is, or the answer is, it's a balance. It's a matter of budget. Is it better to skip prosthetic boots or prosthetic feet into boots and attach these to skis and just go straight from pylon to ski? Yes, if you've got the money. And then what do you do when you want to get out of the ski? Well, you're in feet that are now as rigid as ski boots. Or maybe it just ends in something that clips to a mountain bike, which you've got to get the front to back position correct, biomechanically speaking. And so everything becomes a project. So that methodology is usually seen in hands, where you've got, because hands do so many different jobs. You want a knife hand, you want a hammer hand, potentially a wrench hand. But for feet, the jobs are relatively limited. And the expense, because they have to be strong enough to be weight bearing and last, tends to be even higher.
So we're getting close to the end here. We're kind of talking about the Inspector Gadget feed here. And so if you don't pay your bill each month, you run the risk of Jerome repossessing your feet.
It's because I am a cold-hearted man. One last question.
Yeah, we need your website so we can follow you.
Sure, fitbionic.com.
Fit Bionic?
Yes, used to be called Tensegrity Prosthetics. You want me to spell that? Me neither.
No, I know.
Exactly.
I know who Mr. Fuller is.
Yeah, well, good. Lots of people, if they know that one, they don't know how to spell prosthetics. And finding people who know who the good R. Buckminster Fuller is and was, few and far between.
So this is a great story about all the challenges involved in becoming an inventor. And I want to thank Jerome and and our young lad here, Luke, for coming today. And let's give them a big round of applause.